There are 6 core principles of client protection that have been agreed upon so far. And I should stress that this is really a living set of principles. There are consultations going on all the time about what have we left out. Let me start with those 6, and then I'll share some thoughts on a couple of things that maybe will be the next focus of attention. The first is transparency. And in many ways, this is the bedrock of the client protection principles. So if clients don't have the opportunity to know exactly what they're getting, the pricing, the terms, the conditions of the financing, in a way that's really understandable to them, then this is clearly a problem. So this is the first principle, transparency, and it's usually approached through improved disclosures, use of plain language, and simplified presentation of what financing actually costs, what the interest rates, the fees, any additional commissions for credit products, for instance, what kinds of returns can deposit products be expected to have? Are there hidden fees with different types of deposit accounts? So I should stress that the issues are not only around credit, but also around savings, insurance, payment services. This issue of transparency is one that should apply to all financial services. The second core principle is suitability of the product. So is the provider taking reasonable care to not missell a financial service that really isn't appropriate for the client? Might be profitable, but is likely to get the client into trouble or do not provide good value for money. Now, suitability is a difficult concept. The most obvious example of this would be credit products that are sold without adequate care for repayment ability. And so this second principle is sometimes in shorthand communicated as avoiding over-indebtedness or not lending recklessly. And there are very specific steps that microfinance providers can take even in an environment where they don't have access to Credit Information Bureau data to see if they're paying equal attention to the liability side of the equation as the income side of the equation when they're assessing repayment capacity. This is a principle that is being reinforced, I think, in the current crisis, when in some countries portfolio at risk is going up. In competitive environments, there can be a tendency for late payments to creep up, and I think there's a growing awareness of the need to make sure that the fundamentals are strong and that underwriting of loans is being done on a careful basis. The third principle has to do with appropriate collections practices. And so here we're avoiding clearly abusive and questionable practices. We're not questioning the right of microfinance providers to be aggressive and assertive in ensuring that clients repay, but there are some practices that cross the line. For example, it's been very interesting, some interviewing that's being done around the world in different countries to see what kinds of practices are considered acceptable and unacceptable when you interview loan officers and when you interview clients. And one clear issue has to do with home visits. Is it okay to visit a client at their home if they haven't made a payment? Now, in most societies, that's considered acceptable. But if you ask the question, is it okay to come at 3 in the morning to a client's home, then clearly you've crossed the line. And so the kinds of issues that appropriate collections principle is likely to require attention to focus on timing, nature, activities that could be considered harassment or inappropriate. The fourth principle is staff ethics, and I hope that would go without saying that Microfinance clients should be able to count on the staff that they interact with observing high ethical standards. It's a question of not just having a code of conduct, but being sure that it's enforced, that there are clear sanctions for lack of ethical behavior. And this speaks to issues ranging from sexual favors requested in return for loans, to kickbacks, to a wide variety of practices that it's actually not so hard to define. And the important thing is to build them into incentive systems and oversight. The fifth principle is clients should have access to effective recourse. If something goes wrong, if they don't understand, if abuse has happened or they perceive it has happened, then it's important that the provider have a mechanism for them to pursue their complaint or get the error resolved. And the final principle is one that's really more a horizon issue, but is coming up fast with the advent of branchless banking, and that's data privacy and security. And we're not saying here that data privacy is a sanctified right, that clients should know how their data is used. There are many instances of setups within microfinance institutions that could be improved in terms of the confidentiality of client data. And the issue of data being sold to third parties without client authorization is one that is starting to come up in some of the more advanced markets. So these are the 6 core principles. I will mention just 2 additional issues that are on the horizon and will be discussed in the coming months. One is the issue of fair pricing, and here it's not so much does the client understand, is there transparency, they understand the price of the product, but is that price appropriate and fair? And that's obviously a more controversial topic and one we're going to have to wrestle with for a while, and where there are clearly divergent views in the industry. A second example of a principle that maybe we need to put in place has to do with non-discrimination. In some markets, on the basis of gender, caste, ethnicity, age, discrimination can be an issue in access to finance.